In this video, I'm trying out a 2D art painting style. Hi all, and welcome to the cabin. So today I wanted to challenge myself by painting in a way that I've only tried once before. Whether you call it cel shading, anime, cartoon, or comic book style, it's basically mimicking 2D line art on a three-dimensional surface. I've chosen to paint these Mighty Max figures from Mattel Creations, as I think they will fit perfectly for this type of 2D art painting style. I loved the Mighty Max toys and animated series when I was a kid in the mid-90s. Mattel released these Mighty Max limited edition figures in the muscle style last year, and purely for nostalgia, I picked them up. They are made from a soft, almost rubbery plastic and are designed to be toys, but I think they will look a lot better once I've slapped on some paint. Before starting work on the figures, I took some reference pictures with an overhead light source that I can refer to later during the painting process. There are a few mold lines, which I was able to remove with a sharp hobby knife and a little filing. I don't know how the manufacturing process of these figures works, but just in case there is some form of mold release agent or other residue left on the surface, I decided to clean them properly just to be safe. I'll admit that the soft material was a bit difficult to work with, and my knife left a few notches that I wasn't happy with. To hide these imperfections and further help prep the surface for painting, I applied a mix of milliput and isopropyl alcohol. If you want to know more about this trick, there's a link to a dedicated video about it on screen now. After that, I undercoated the models with white, and it was time to begin painting. The first step for this type of 2D art painting style is to apply base coats to all the surfaces. I'm aiming for the colors Mighty Max had in the animated series, but I chose ever so slightly darker shades so that I can highlight them properly later. This is a fairly straightforward process involving a few thin coats of paint for each area and correcting any mistakes using the previous colors. I'm no expert on this painting style, and I made this video more as a personal challenge than a definitive painting guide. Therefore, I chose not to display all the paint names on screen this time, but in the unlikely scenario that someone else wants to paint these Mighty Max figures in the same way, there's a list of all the paints in the description below. Now it's time to paint some additional layers on top of the base coats, and it's here that the pictures with an overhead light source come in handy. They provide a good guide for where to place shadows and highlights. Additionally, by applying an oil painting filter in an image editing software, the shadows and highlights become exaggerated, helping to define their shapes. I chose to apply all the shadows first, picking an even darker shade of each base color and carefully placing them according to the pictures. I had to resist the urge to blend the shadows with the base coats. This is meant to be a stylized paint job after all. However, it's difficult to override your painting instincts, and I worried that it wouldn't look right. But rather than stop or restart, sometimes you just have to trust the process and push through the ugly phase. With the shadows in place, the next step was to apply the highlights. This was done in much the same way, but this time with a lighter shade of the base color. As an alternative method, you could choose to apply only shadows or only highlights for an even more stylized look. In fact, you could even skip both stages and just stick with the base coats if you prefer. The miniatures might look a bit flat, but thanks to the next stage, they will still appear cartoony. Before that though, I made sure to paint the eyes. These exaggerated sculpts have quite large eyes, which makes this process much easier. To keep with the stylized look, I aim to make the eyes appear slightly cartoony as well. I find that painting the outermost color first and gradually working towards the center with increasingly smaller areas works best for me. Now it's time for probably the single most important step: blacklining. Using a small detail brush, I simply painted lines in pure black to simulate the line work of animation or comic books. I generally kept these in recesses or used them to divide areas where two colors meet. However, you can also apply them as edge highlights or wherever they enhance the look. It can be tempting to overdo this, but I think it's important to strike a balance. I tried to view the figures as flat images and imagined where the lines would naturally fall if it were a drawing. Once this step was complete, the figures looked entirely different, and I think we finally got through the ugly stage. These toys have tiny feet and are quite prone to falling over. To counter this and to make them look more like collectible miniatures, I decided to mount them on bases. Once again, I wanted to challenge myself and try something new, so I grabbed some polymer clay and rolled it out on the underside of an old baking tray. Using a plain roller, I flattened the clay to about 2 or 3 millimeters thick. After that, I used textured rollers from Green Stuff World to add details to the clay. I opted for an ancient temple look for 3 of the figures and an industrial theme for the muscular Max holding the wrench. Then I used round cutters, also from Green Stuff World, to achieve the correct size. The 38mm cutter works perfectly for the 40mm Games Workshop bases that I'm using. Next, it was time to bake them in the oven, and once cured, I glued them onto the plastic bases. I undercoated these in black and used an overbrushing technique to keep some of the black in the recesses. Some of it was still lost though, so a coat of Nuln Oil helped restore the color. I tried to avoid staining the flat surfaces with the wash, and I guess an enamel or oil wash would have been better. Either way, now there's no need to apply the blacklining by hand, which is a relief for such intricate surfaces. I added some shadows and highlights, cleaned up the rim with black, pinned the figures to the bases, and applied a coat of varnish to tie everything together. And with that, these Mighty Max figures are finished. As I've mentioned, I'm not very experienced with this type of stylized paint job, but I enjoyed experimenting with it, and I think the results are decent. They certainly look much better than they did straight out of the box. If you decide to try this style of painting yourself, don't let the ugly face get to you, and remember to have fun. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. Please consider giving the video a like and subscribing to the channel so you don't miss out on future content. A special thank you to Arnold over on Patreon. And if you want to go that extra mile and get some nice perks while helping us out, all our links are in the description below. We'll see you next time. Good luck with your miniatures.